There he is.
Once again, I'm here.
Sorry, Jonathan Fink. 1 second. Prof, check your WhatsApp from me, please. Thank you. Okay.
Yes. So obviously it's a bit of a surprise one. And you are just about to put an episode out and you're like, okay, that's almost instantly out of date. Or is it? That was the big question, because the episode I put out was saying, what is the evidence of betrayal of Ukraine? And there's an absolute mountain of it. And it wasn't really so much betrayal. The episode was asking, what are the indicators that Trump is more aligned with Moscow than he is with Ukraine and allies? And actually, there's some interesting points there. So even though we've got the sort of this ceasefire announcement, and we'll come to what happens next on Moscow's side, the overwhelming evidence is that Trump is acting against the interest of Western allies. You know, the tariffs against Canada have been up today. There's been an announcement that there will be no US participation in NATO exercises in Europe. So overall, we still have, I would say, a massive number of signals that Trump is acting to the longer term benefit of the Kremlin as opposed to allies. But we have to react to what's changing. And I think this is a masterful stroke by Zelenskyy. It puts the ball in the court of Moscow. I think anyone who's watched the behavior of Russia over years actually calculated it the other day. It's a bit scary. I've been observing Russia for 38 years now.
Wow.
And they lie, and they lie, and they lie, and they never stop lying. And the aggression is a fairly consistent feature as well. So whatever happens, you know, Ukraine and its allies need to be prepared for Russia to break its word and to renew aggression where it's able to. That's not to say that aggression may be renewed against Ukraine, because if Ukraine is armed to the hilt, well, they might go after softer targets, Central Asia, Moldova, etc. So that's just my initial take on that. I'm not going to suddenly, you know, run around, you know, put a flowery headdress on and say peace and love and it's all over.
No, this is just a step. And right now, I agree completely with you. First of all, I've been saying it all afternoon. Zelenskyy did a phenomenal job playing this with so much pressure against him over the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, personal attacks, the pure disaster and debacle in the White House, being called the dictator, being called a thief, being called a bandit, being called the just a day or so ago, this guy, you know, takes money from the U.S. like candy from a baby. And when you come on this day, Zelenskyy standing there strong like a good diplomatic leader who makes the statement, we're still here and we're looking for a just peace. That's what you need to pay attention to, what Zelensky's statement was tonight. Not a security guarantee only, but a just peace. Now, as Rubio said, the ball is in Putin's court. And I mean, we've all stood. I mean, Jonathan, I've worked in Russia since 94. So I've got, 31 years and 28 in Ukraine. So we have a lot of history with them. And you're right. If they're talking about something, they will change. They will lie. They will do what is to their benefit. But on this day, at this moment, right this second, 5:11 Eastern Standard Time, kudos to Zelenskyy in Ukraine. They haven't even signed a minerals deal, and we've got a resumption of intelligence. We've got a resumption of supply, and we've got pressure going toward Moscow that they're going to have to respond to. That's just where I stand today, and we just have to wait step by step.
Which one of you guys is live streaming this as well? Because it looks like I've got some. It's Jonathan. Okay, so just to let Jonathan's audience know that we have had a previous big long chat about all of what's taken place, so we won't be retreading those steps. We have discussed what's been said by Zelenskyy, what's been said by Walz and Trump, and what the issues are. The TLDR is: will Russia agree to sign up? And or to to sign up to the truce. And if they don't, what will be the consequences from the US? And if they do, are they likely to break it? And what would the consequences be to that, et cetera, et cetera? So we've also talked about how actually Zelenskyy might well have played this very well. There will be a lot of people, the MAGA crowd will be trying to sing the praises of Trump, saying this is all Trump. And you could argue to a degree, yep, Trump is responsible for forcing these things through. The question is from a big picture point of view, was that to the benefit of Ukraine? Had actually instead Ukraine been provided with even more weapons and Russia hit with even greater sanctions, Russia would have been crippled on their knees, and this war would have actually been, I think, or a peace would have been brought about more quickly, and Ukraine would have been in a much stronger position, and that hasn't happened. So this is an outcome that I think will eventually be the less decent outcome, even if a peace is arrived at. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Prof, good.
I got a question for Darren. Hi, great to see you here.
I'd like to go back to something that Jonathan said, and that is, first, I'd like to see him in a flowery headdress. Second, I have to.
That can be arranged, by the way. That can be arranged.
Russia. They said the Russians are liars, right? Let's go back to that, right? Like that's part of the picture. They haven't changed, and so. Let's see what the Russians do as we move forward. So this puts now Zelenskyy. I have to tie Reagan again back to it. It's not just Reagan worship here, but Reagan was known as the great communicator. Zelenskyy, I see a lot of the same kind of attributes in Zelenskyy as far as being able to communicate effectively and really precisely. So one of the things that happened today was tying this to Trump's ego, right? I want to thank Trump for making this possible to, right? So that's a really good, like whatever you think about Trump, that was a really smart step on Zelensky's part. And so let's see what the Russians do, because the ball, as Rubio said, is in their court. And so from this point forward, now I've been saying this has been my theory, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people are like, well, Trump, he's just in Russia's court. Yes, that's what it looks like. That is, I mean, I agree that's what it looks like. If he only zigs and he doesn't zag, then you'll have extra evidence that that's the case. Now, if Russia doesn't come to the table and he continues to not zig and only zig and not zag, what I mean by that, if he only just sweetens the pot for Russia to come to the table, or does nothing if they don't come to the table, then you'll know that theory is right. And if he zags and starts arming Ukraine or doing something that is punishing toward Russia, then you'll know that he's in a different place. But here's how we'll be able to see moving forward where Trump actually is. I think, and correct me, tell me what you think about my theory here. I think this is a way of framing and being able to see where Trump actually is. Yeah. What do you think?
I mean, I think let's assume, and there'll be a lot of people saying this is silly, this is naive, there's so much evidence that he's an asset, etc. And we know he's taken money from Russians in the past, but let's assume that he is just ultimately transactional, that he's only really out for himself and his donors and this kind of stuff. Well, if he's got a smart business head on him, and actually I'm going to concede a point to Trump, he is an excellent marketeer. He may not be a great businessman, but he is excellent at marketing. And sometimes some of his deals do kind of come off. He would have put in place a deal whereby he profits if Ukraine falls, he profits if Ukraine stands, he profits if there's a ceasefire, and he tries to profit if there isn't. So if he's kind of done a smart deal here, he's going to be the winner no matter what the outcome is. This is assuming that Russia doesn't necessarily have some kind of way of coercively controlling him. So I think that's one thing we can say for certain, that he's going to try to come off best from all of this. I had a question. Well, let everyone sort of answer that. But I had a question for Greg and Darren especially. If, let's say, the rhetoric against Zelenskyy and stuff starts dialing down, and we continue with this vein that Ukraine is seen to be the one pushing for peace and agreeing to concessions no matter how painful, and then Russia betrays that and humiliates Trump, what is going to be the reaction of conservative audiences? Because of course they're in an information bubble. Of course there's a lot of bad narratives that are being propagated. But everyone will be able to see here that Ukraine has made the move towards peace. And then not only they have been betrayed by Russia, but also their cult leader has been betrayed, what's likely to be the reaction of people who aren't necessarily, into the Ukraine story or pro-Ukraine? Are they going to take this really badly?
Finn, can you just check your private chat a second? But yeah, I'll let the others answer that, obviously.
Greg, you want to chime in?
No, go ahead, Prof. Go ahead.
So what I'm going to be looking for is what's said on Newsmax and Fox News and conservative/Republican media. So after, and the reason I say that is because after the Oval Office thing, I do a video about showing the exact clip and showing who said what and how JD Vance said this. And like Zelenskyy, all he said was like, what diplomacy? What are you talking about? And I went through that. And then I watched Fox News and CNN later on that night. And when I was watching Fox News, I was like, that's not right. What are you talking about? That like, but I was looking at their narrative, right? Now, I'm going to be looking for that, because what's the narrative that is not just from Trump, but from conservative media on the other side of that? That'll be really interesting. It really hurts my head to agree as much as I do with CNN and MSNBC news broadcasts, because for years I've been told that I'm a racist because I'm a Republican, when I know that I'm not. And so it's been a hard thing to untangle that and then go, wait a minute, they're saying the truth here. So like, okay, so I'll be looking to see what happens, but I can't tell you. I don't know how to predict this, but that's what I'm going to be keying in on.
And if I was to tag on to what Prof is saying there, Johnny and I, before you fine gentlemen are able to join us, we're actually discussing this. Johnny was bringing up a point that I think will help answer the question from the American perspective. We were looking at the behavioral changes in somebody like a Peter Doocy, who is the Fox News White House correspondent, where from Fox News, where at the beginning everything is hunky dory, everybody buddy, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And over the last few days, the rhetoric is changing, even from that conservative, Peter Doocy type person. And then if you begin to extrapolate that out to friends and people, and then we can only talk with those that we talk to. We're at a critical junction right now, where this could either go really, really well, or this could go horribly wrong. But Jonathan Fink, I completely agree with you. The art of the deal, Donald Trump somehow is making a plan or a play that either way this goes, he thinks he can win.
I think that the majority of Republicans, and even the majority of MAGA Republicans, there are some who are too far gone, but the majority of Republicans are not huge fans of Putin, right? And they recognize deep in their heart of hearts that Putin is a bad guy. And what they're wanting to, so what's been happening over the course of the last 6 weeks is it's a cult of personality, and whatever Trump says, I will just defend no matter what. The whole idea of like, I can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and they'll still vote for me, is what Trump absolutely relies on. So people go along with it. They get sold this narrative of how, the way that Trump is dealing with Ukraine is the right way. Sensible Republicans like Don Bacon are like, no, this is not cool. But many people go along with that. But so therefore, if Trump then switches and says, hey, this is great, and we're going to screw Russia over, but if they break the truce, then actually that's the excuse that they need to go, yes, yeah, I knew this was all going to work out type thing. Even though that probably isn't ideally what Trump wants. Trump just wants to do a trade deal with Russia to open up, get the natural resources and enrich himself and enrich the United States. Whereas I think it was Don Bacon himself that was saying, or it might be Mark Kelly, but one of them was saying, this war shouldn't just be about for America doing things that are just going to enrich America. This should be about doing things that put us in a good standing, that make us the leader of the free world, that allow people to look at us and say, these are the people we want to aspire to because they're doing the right moral thing. So there's a moral dimension that's been severely missing, and perhaps this allows Trump to sell that moral dimension to a lot of his audience that have been going along with it from a purely transactional point of view, but have been desperately wanting there to be a little bit more than that.
Okay, so there are some Republicans that are still going, well, he's just playing 4D chess. There are still some that are thinking like that he's pro-Ukraine. I did this little survey on my poll on my wall on Facebook, and just said, okay, if you're a conservative, tell me, like, do you think? Okay, I think my three choices were like, this is about exactly what I expected from Trump. Only American conservatives, right? Please, everybody else, just if you want to look at it, look at it. Like, here's a fourth choice just to look at. First one was, this is what I thought Trump would do. And then the second one was, well, hold on, let me pull this up as I explain what it is. The second one, give me just a second. Oh, please forgive me for the taking the time here to pause here. But it's really interesting to see what the okay. So American Left and Internationals, this poll is just for American conservatives. I'm an American conservative, and first choice was, I thought Trump would do precisely what he's doing, 12%. And then I thought Trump would be better and potentially help Ukraine at 6%. And then I never imagined that he would do what he is doing to Ukraine, 17%. So it's about 2-1 that really thought, like, what's going on here? Like, I thought he would be better, or I never thought he would do this. So that's where their mindset still is. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens on the backside of this. If Trump switches gears and then you see conservatives going a different direction with him pro-Ukraine, there'll be multiple academic papers in that.
There's a good point there, actually, because I think you'll suddenly get loads of Republicans going, thank goodness for this. Like, thank you. Let's get behind this and really support Trump. And then that will communicate to Trump that actually there's a lot of Republican opinion that supports doing the right thing for Ukraine, like releasing the aid and releasing the intelligence sharing. And I just think that he might then just ride that wave of like, yeah, I told you, and say this is all 4D chess, even though it really wasn't. But
I don't think he really has the plan, but there's a lot of people that really believe that he does. That's my point here.
And I was listening to quite a few analysts talk about him recently, like I think John Bolton and a few others, saying, you think he plays 4D chess? No, you don't know Donald Trump. Like, I've worked with him and he doesn't have these big plans. That he's not capable of that. But anyway.
But to Jonathan's point, marketing is like, if I were to give Trump strong marks in any part of business, and remember, I'm in the College of Business because of my I teach leadership. That's where we're usually housed. I'd say marketing is his strongest suit. He markets and markets and markets and markets, and sometimes things work out and sometimes things don't. I would not say finance is his great strength, but marketing, yeah.
And I would just reinsert here once again. Earlier, I actually shared Putin's response, and I pulled it back up from June the 14th, 2024, because regardless of how we're looking at things, if we go to a core baseline issue, I think we all can agree the baseline issue that Putin and Russia is 100% anti-Ukraine. They call them a Nazi regime, okay? Sure. Secondly, they are 100% anti-America. This is stated multiple times, even warning and continuing to work on forming the coalition with China, North Korea, India with that huge oil deal, Iran. They want this new world order. So you have to have that as an underlying, like a bedrock place to start. This has to influence how Putin and Moscow is going to react to when this ceasefire proposal is delivered to them. They start from the basis of, for years of this war, the active phase since 2022, 2014, really the initiation over 10 years. This is a neo-Nazi regime of evil, and we are anti-West, we are anti-America, we are anti-NATO, we are all about us. Our only friend in the world is Lukashenko, and really he's just one of us. That's it. So that's where you have to remember, this is where we start from. So if that's the baseline, and then Putin, June the 14th, 2024, I have the video and we will hold it. We will hold it. I played it earlier. He said, the only way that Russia will agree to a ceasefire is if the Ukrainian army leaves the 4 oblasts that we have on record in our constitution, which is Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. And I just want to remind you folks, it's only Lugansk that's about 98, 99% occupied. Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, you're talking, if this is what he comes back to the table with, the same statement he made in June of 2024, that is a pipe dream. because that means Ukraine has to pull out their army from all of the 4 regions and give up the cities of Zaporizhia and Kherson. Not going to happen. Not going to happen.
Here's a bit of stimulus for people. Phillips O'Brien, good analyst to follow. First impressions on the US-Ukraine deal are that Ukraine has shown that it's always best not to grovel, apologize, or become desperate with Trump. He cut their aid, he helped kill their people, and they kept fighting with their head held high. They made him look cruel, and he blinked.
Let me go back to a point that Jonathan was making about Russia, view toward Russia, or the Russian view toward America, and it's reciprocated. 9 out of 10 Americans, this is a Pew Research poll I'm looking at, it's actually 11%, but 9 out of 10 Americans basically do not have a favorable view toward Russia. And I've made this point again and again, like very unfavorable or something in there. Generally, so I've seen plenty of Ukraine stickers, Ukraine hats, Ukraine whatever, bumper stickers, that kind of thing. I've not seen anybody wearing Russia or a bumper sticker that's Russia or pro-Russian sentiment. What you generally find in the US is some variation of "it's not my problem" or "yeah, but Ukraine's corrupt too." It's not anti-Ukraine sentiment for the most part, unless you're talking about like Marjorie Taylor Greene or some of those people that are mouthpieces. But it's generally speaking just why are we? I don't want to get sucked into it. It's World War III. But it's not. Yes, we must defend Russia. So
Exactly.
I think that plays well for us.
And I completely agree with that. I mean, you honestly, guys, this is no joke. I live in Western Pennsylvania, and it's difficult for me to take a drive around Western Pennsylvania, and let's just call it between Pittsburgh and Erie and over to Cleveland area, Youngstown, and not see multiple big tractor trailers that have "We Stand with Ukraine," "Fighting for Freedom," a blue and yellow flag on the back of the trailer, the tractor's pulling, bumper stickers. People still have flags in their yards, yard signs. I mean, and I know that they're coming from different political persuasions, different religious views, but they really do. America's not anti-Ukraine. It's just not. They're anti-Russia.
You're in a purple state. I live in a Republican state that went for Trump by 400,000 plus, and I see it everywhere. So, I mean, it's like the sentiment is there. It's just that the loudest mouths, the loudest MAGA mouths, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and others, are saying other stuff. So, we'll see how it plays out with Fox News and that sort of thing in a little bit.
The Fox News are so important for driving the narrative. Most of the anti-Ukraine sentiment is essentially driven. Well, it is driven top down. It's driven by Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Elon Musk, JD Vance, these sort of Tucker Carlson, but then funneled through talk radio, funneled through Fox News to the audience, and you start changing that. It's just the audience would be fine. This is why I was saying earlier, they just want to be told the truth. They're not ideologically aligned with Tucker Carlson on Ukraine. They have been hoodwinked on Ukraine, many of them. You just put the record straight with them and they'll be absolutely fine with giving, Trump, if Trump had got if Trump before the election had said, "I'm campaigning on giving an absolute shed load of weapons to Ukraine," all of his supporters would have gone along with that. Absolutely would have been fine with that.
There is a MAGA strain that
there is a very extreme,
But if I had a nickel for every time I heard someone say, I just can't watch Tucker anymore, or I can't watch Laura Ingraham. Now, Laura Ingraham has the anchor point on the spectrum on Fox News, but then you have Brian Kilmeade on the other side, who is still
good on Ukraine.
Right. Yeah. So there's different personalities, but I would look at Laura Ingram's ratings. Oh, I should do that. I should try to find Laura Ingram's ratings because she's the most MAGA mouse type, pro anti-Ukraine supporter. I got to see.
You check on that while I'll say this. On my live stream a couple days ago, I went into unfortunately a Johnny rant, and I was actually ranting. So I want to concur with what Professor Gertis is saying there. You have these mouthpieces that are large, and that's just always going to be there. My concern, though, is where a lot of that MAGA anti-Ukraine narrative has really blossomed unfortunately has come through the evangelical church, and they really, not all. So guys, don't take it. I'm a pastor. Don't take it. But I'm telling you, there is a section of the evangelical church that gets into this prophecy, and Trump is the savior of the world coming on a white horse, and anything that is stated is directly from the throne of God. And one of the largest narratives was the hatred of Ukraine, the corruption of Ukraine, the evil of Ukraine. Zelenskyy is a bandit. Zelenskyy is a dictator. And I am just disgusted with how much that narrative has come through that Christian right nationalistic view. And that's really one of the areas I'm trying to fight against and stand for truth. And we're making a difference in it, because
you see, okay, so this is going to be some shop talk between Greg and I. Greg's on the more charismatic side of the spectrum. I'm on the Baptist side of the evangelical spectrum. I don't see that as much, but I do understand, because I've seen that.
No, it's on the charismatic side. 100%
It seems like
agree.
it's more inflamed about that. Where on the Baptist side of the spectrum, it's a lot less pronounced, and it's just a lower issue. Just like, why are we talking about that?
Can I just say something on
I
behalf?
use the word. Sorry, Johnny. That's why I use the word prophecy. I mean, they're literally standing up, worshiping. You know, Trump is coming on a white carriage into Washington D.C., and he's going to reveal the evil of Ukraine, and it is spreading. And listen, you say, well, how many people is that? It's millions. It's millions. Yeah. And that's what we're fighting against.
What cuts through, though, because I mean, you probably know this guy, but Stephen Moore has he's been working on a film that tries to cut through these narratives, showing not just Russian Orthodox. And this film actually follows Baptist a pastor and his community in eastern Ukraine. Congregation kidnapped, tortured, churches torched to the ground. Is this kind of, and I won't call it propaganda. I mean, it's pro-Ukraine propaganda for truth, let's say. But would that kind of storytelling help to cut through the kind of things you're talking about, Greg?
If they're willing to watch.
Sorry, can I just interrupt for a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead, JP. I'll answer, Jonathan. I won't forget.
Yeah, I just want to interrupt on behalf of the people watching from the UK. So what these guys are talking about, Greg and Prof. Gerdes, is something known as God. And we in the UK haven't talked about that for a long time, but some people in the US still talk about this. So I just want, because they were like charismatics. What are they talking? Are they people that are just got good personalities? Anyway, I just need to translate that for the English viewers. Carry on.
The
When's
reality
the last time the Church of England talked about that?
Okay. Jonathan Fink, I can answer that question very simply.
Please, yes.
Okay,
before I say something completely...
yes, I can answer that question very
trivial
simply.
and insulting, yeah.
The pastor who is out of Mariupol right now, and he is the commander of the Mariupol Chaplains Brigade, basically is what they're called. They're massive. I have the patch over here. I know him personally. We're friends. The amount of work that he does supporting the military and and guys, don't get me the chaplain side. I'm talking about supporting the military, and in addition to what you would consider chaplaincy work. But we're talking fighting, guys. And he's in the United States right now, and he has actually left several of his meetings because where he was scheduled to go in the southern part of the United States, the churches had a wrong view, and he was there sharing personally. He's from Mariupol, fighting on the front lines, running around helping, and they still wouldn't believe it. I'll give my personal example now. That's why you can't get any more powerful than the personal connection. Many churches that I have been to over the last 3 years, Jonathan Fink, because I got two Jonathans here, I have had people that I have known for over 20 years come up to me and say, Greg, we see the great work you're doing there in Ukraine. Proud of you. It's really amazing. Helping the people, helping the military and all that. And then this is what they say to me. But you know you're wrong, right? And my answer, Jonathan, is, okay, so I've worked there for 27 years. I can speak the language. I run the front lines with the military. We help everybody we can. and I'm there nonstop. But you're sitting in your house here in Reno, Nevada, and you know more about Ukraine than I do. Well, it was in the magazine. It came from our headquarters. So it is hard to break that narrative when somebody is just the example. I have a 20-year relationship with this person. They appreciate what I'm doing, but still tell me I'm wrong, and Zelenskyy is the bad guy. How do you fight against it? I don't know the answer to that, other than doing it every day.
I mean, there is a lot to be said, and this is kind of what Jonathan Fink was talking about with regard to someone who's created a documentary is trying to change the, we get on our videos and we wax lyrical about Ukraine and everything, but we're like preaching to the converted. How do you affect a change in the people who are entrenched in these positions, that live in the Fox world, that live in the Newsmax, OAN, talk radio world, or in the evangelical Christian nationalism world, or the GOP world? These are the people that you need to change the minds of, and it's very difficult for someone like me as a liberal atheist to come along and go, well, you guys should believe in Ukraine being the good guys, and they're like, dude, yeah, you haven't got a chance convincing me. So this is about how do you, it's about the messenger as much as the message.
You might have already said this, but that something like that movie could be very, very instrumental.
Exactly.
In that. And letting Greg and myself, our kind of voices lend to it is probably better than yours at this point for that particular crowd, just because, right?
True that.
So.
Yeah.
It is a challenge, though. It's just a challenge when you think of a population section that just generally should be caring about somebody else, or the Good Samaritan narrative, and they're the ones that are actually leading the charge many times the opposite direction. It's mind-boggling for me. But I think Jonathan Fink, to answer your question, Prof answered it. Any way that we can push the truth and push the narrative and push reality, whether it's media, it's personal, it's people sharing, it's people writing their constituent. I mean, this is an all-out assault for truth, and that's what we're all fighting for, and we all have to do anything possible at this point. Because
remember, go ahead.
I mean, in the longer term, do we have to somehow cut through and educate people about how the Russian Orthodox Church has been corrupted by the secret police? Maybe even start a unit, bring back spirituality to Russia, and find other narratives that are more, appealing, maybe.
I've been beating down this path for a little while here. I was talking to Constantine about this like a year ago. I was talking to you, Greg, about this some time ago as well, where like people that once listened to Tucker, like there are some that still listen to him, but people that listen to, like, Tucker was like kind of an accepted source, and then he kind of went like way off the rails here, and like he was the one really like the Ukrainians, they outlawed an entire religion, and so people are just hearing that repeated again and again rather than understanding what actually happened. And if you understand, like when Putin talks about traditional values, he's not talking about what Greg and I are like in going to church on Sunday morning and trying to love our neighbor. Right. That's a very different thing than what Putin means by that. Like Greg and I will probably be like, you know what? I'm pro-life. Right. So Greg and I are going to probably be on that side of the spectrum, but because we care about the human being, not because we're trying to raise another army in 20 years. There's a big difference between those two positions, and good people can even sit down and agree or disagree and hear each other and that sort of thing. But I mean, I'm on this particular side of the spectrum, and that looks like I'm there with Putin, but for a whole different reason. Yeah. It's not for that reason at all. Where we just have to.
His pro-life is make more cannon meat.
That's exactly right.
That's exactly right. And this is one of the statements that I'm reading the comment there. Putin is an atheist. I think that's. I don't know what Putin is, to be honest with you.
And he uses the church.
He uses the church.
It's frustrating to watch how he.
Sorry, I just saw
he'll show up and that sort of thing. Go ahead.
I do want to say this though. That is part of the narrative that gets twisted, and this is how we have to try to figure out how to untwist the narrative, because here's a fact: the Ukrainian government, led by the wartime president, Vladimir Zelenskyy, has closed Russian Orthodox churches that were being utilized by the FSB to destroy Ukraine from the inside out. It was not a religious move. It was not a repression of freedom. It was a defense of their state, blocking the traitorous activity that was happening to take place inside and through that Kirill-led evil propaganda FSB KGB war machine known as the Russian Orthodox Church. So then the American right nut jobs like Tucker Carlson take that, turn that into the story that Zelensky's closing all the churches. And then what happens is the Christians hear that and they go, well, my God, that's so evil. And none of it is true. They were closing corrupt, evil enemies of the state. And that's what's so difficult to battle against.
And, you know, we have to translate it into ways that people understand. And I think, you know, that's as true for an audience in Europe as it is for anywhere else. You know, would the US have tolerated, let's say, a German-run church operating right across the US during World War II? I mean, would that have been tolerated if it had been proved that they were disseminating Nazi propaganda? And everyone's instant answer would be like, are you crazy? Of course we wouldn't. Yeah, and exactly. we got to tell stories that resonate.
I've got a question for my two believing guests, or not guests, because we're I'm co-streaming with Fink, actually. So Fink and I have a similar worldview. Greg and Prof. Gertis are somewhat different. And my friend Rob has asked, JP, would you guess celebrate if either Trump or Putin, so let's go Putin here, because I think that's, but if Putin was assassinated, interesting theological discussion. How would you feel if Putin was assassinated?
Personally, I wouldn't be in favor of that. I want him to actually stand trial for his crimes. And I know that's idealistic. I don't know that it'll happen, but that's what I would like to see in an ideal world. And if you did assassinate Putin, what's the next guy going to be like? I'm not trying to say like, yeah, I understand you're getting rid of an evil, but you're probably replacing an evil because ideologically it hasn't gone away. But I'll leave that to the experts.
But on a battlefield, but Darren, on the battlefield, what you are doing is assassinating each other.
Yeah, I understand that.
And Putin is a commander in chief, effectively, and so therefore he is the ultimate general. And so actually, I would argue that is actually part of the. If you are saying it's okay to have people dying, not okay, but like I can justify this soldier shooting that soldier, and this sniper taking out that soldier, then actually what's the difference of this sniper taking out the commander in chief?
Okay, now I have to defend my answer here, and I'm perfectly fine with doing that. So for ideological reasons, I don't want that, because I want him to stand trial and have to see what the world see, like this is wrong. This, I want a Nuremberg like something. I know it's ideal, but it may not happen. But there's a practical reason as well. Nothing will rile Russia and create a rally around the flag effect more than the assassination of their president. And then you're going to have a whole different problem set.
I don't know.
Although
I don't know. Yeah. That's a big assumption.
Okay. So this is me as an American looking at this with the things that I know. But if you're
that's
if you
how
have
American would
view,
feel.
go ahead.
Absolutely. I don't know about Russians, because one of the magic of dictators is fear. They can only exert fear when they're alive. The minute they're dead, that fear is gone. So we don't know what underlying feelings there are to Putin. Certainly earlier on in his reign, I think there was certain genuine sense that, you know, he has contributed to a revival of Russia and its strength, and he's brought back respect to Russia and the world. But since the war began, I think that has been eroded considerably. And if it was the case that, boom, something happens to him, And then people became aware of the extraordinary profligacy with their lives and wealth that he's exercised. I think whatever sympathy might be there would evaporate quickly. Not the whole population, there'd be a small core of them, but they'd be far too busy scrabbling to get, the next dictator set up. So I don't know. We're imposing our framework interpretation.
Yeah,
I don't know if it stands. I just don't.
Let me push back on one thing. Two different scenarios. One, he just dies in a freak plane crash that had nothing to do with anybody or anything.
Nothing
I think in
to
that,
do with anybody.
no,
Yes.
seriously,
Budanov, not involved.
No,
in
seriously,
any way.
I mean, it just is an accident. I think what you're saying is absolutely right in that circumstance. I don't know in the circumstance when it's done by this foreign country. Like, think about how, like, when Trump was almost assassinated, like, everybody who was a good upstanding Democrat was like, we didn't want anything to happen to him because, like, as much as I hate the guy, the Democrats are saying, as much as I can't stand the guy, that's not how we want to do it. Now, the Russian mindset may be very different, and you would be the expert, not me, but that's how I'm processing this. So I could be wrong, and I'll defer to you, but I'm saying I think there's a difference in the scenario. But again,
There is
my
in the
turn to
US,
answer yet from the other one? Please let me answer.
Yes.
Okay. First of all, there's the Mariupol chaplain brigade I'm talking about. And you guys just bear with me for a moment. Okay. Boom, 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 boom. Hello. How about let me do this. All the units we help, and every one of them, I have lost personal friends. I have lost guys that have been erased. I have been under the fire of glide bombs. I have been hit, had drones slung at myself. I've been under a ballistic missile attack. Let me tell you what, I want him to be wasted off of this planet and vaporized. And I want to go there and plant a flag, and I want to say that is for Ukraine, and that is for Peter Michael Fouché, and that is for every little girl that was wiped off this planet from some school, women in maternity hospitals, people that you got me going now. Absolutely had nothing to do with your evil intentions. You erase them from this planet. And then what you do is you will strike a building. And then when the rescue workers get there, you then want to go and double tap them and erase them off this planet. Goodbye, sir. Erase you from the planet, and we'll deal with what we have to deal with next.
For the record, my scenario comes with the death penalty.
Okay, well, that's better.
I mean, I'm just adding that. I just want him to stand trial first before.
From my historical perspective, I'm kind of I'm with Greg, but for another reason. Obviously, recalling all the horrific trauma. I mean, just that little boy who crossed the border right in the first week, on his own, crying across the border. The family, the man whose entire family are raised. I mean, there's so many images that come to mind. There's the man whose son was killed at a bus stop, and it just yes, but historic example shows that yes, we had Nuremberg, and the Nazis were some of the key Nazis, the ones that weren't then employed in the space race. They did go on trial. No Russian has ever been put on trial, has never ever faced justice for all the crimes of the Soviet Union, all the crimes of Tsarism, all the crimes that followed, the crimes of Chechnya, the crimes of Georgia. No Russian has ever faced the music. So in that sense, I'm with Greg that Ukrainians have to make their justice.
Hold on, you're supposed to be with me on that. So, like, let me explain. This is what Timothy Snyder talks about, where because they haven't faced, like, the USSR collapsed, but they never had to face the music like Germany did, like Japan did. And so that's what I'm talking about, like, where they have to come to terms with that this cannot stand, and then they can join the community of nations in a different way. They've never had to do it, and that's part of why they're still having the empire mindset.
Totally agree with you there. If there was a chance to have that re-education program and some truth reconciliation, absolutely. The reality is, however, as we enter a world of let's say autocrats feeling they have greater impunity even than they did before, if we're faced with the situation that Russians will never be held to account, then there's the Mossad solution, which is you go and you collect your evidence, and then you go and take these guys out. And I think that's almost certainly what Ukraine will end up doing.
I don't want people to misunderstand me. I'm not for just running around killing people, but this, evil needs to be wiped out, and people have paid such a high price. And I will remind you guys that Donald Trump issued an executive order imposing sanctions on the ICC. There's no value and regard for The Hague or international. You guys were addressing that and speaking to that. But when you get down to the personal story, I don't know if you remember very early in the war with Bucha and Irpin, and we saw the famous picture of the guy riding his bicycle, and he was laid over on the side of his bicycle. That was my personal friend. I knew that person personally. It was the first person in the war, and it was very early, just in the first few days of the war, that I personally knew that was killed, and literally killed for no purpose and no reason, and pure evil. And for just that story, you can then just I don't want to get the wrong word here. It's exponentially larger when you take it then rape, when you and the approval from the world for 3 years for allowing this to happen. No, I unfortunately, in this situation, for me, justice is the leader of that evil atrocity. I would be very happy if that person was wiped out.
This is
John, how do you
fascinating.
answer?
Well, this is fascinating for me, just listening to you guys, because this goes to show that when you have discussions about morality, that is very, on the one hand, we can have moral discussions from an abstract, rational point of view, but actually psychology plays an awful large part in moral decision making. Mm-hmm. So there's a famous philosophical thought experiment called the trolley experiment, where you have a trolley going down a track. It's going to kill five people working on a track, and you can pull the lever and it changes track and it just kills one person. It turns out about 89% of people would pull the lever to save the 5 people and kill the 1 person. So we make that rational decision. But when you then take that thought experiment, it's exactly the same rationale, but instead of pulling a lever, you're pushing a large person off a bridge, and that person is large enough to stop the trolley, and it kills him but saves the 5 people. It turns out that percentage has changed. And so it turns out that most of us are not willing to push someone off a bridge to kill them, but we can pull a lever to kill them. In other words, psychology plays a really important part in our moral decision making. And I think we just saw that, which is Greg taking on board his personal experiences of this war and allowing that to really really influence how he sees this decision, whereas Greg is coming at this from a much more kind of abstract point of view. I would probably come at it from an abstract point of view, but also know that intuitively I have an intuitive urge to say, yeah, he should be assassinated. That is definitely part of my thinking. But I would probably defer to a moral framework called consequentialism, which is the consequences of an action of what beget the moral value. And there are very many ways of understanding moral consequentialism. It's very nuanced, but in its simplest terms, that's what you see in the lever pulling, which is the consequences is 1 person dies rather than 5. I would just say I would advocate assassinating Putin, but it would be largely contingent upon a probability assessment of what would happen if he was killed. And because we don't know that, I would have to go to loads of experts, and it would actually be quite a long and drawn out thing where I'd be like, these people say this people says that. Like, what happens if he was assassinated? Just like Jonathan Fink was saying, we don't know. Actually, the Russian population could be absolutely waiting for something like that to happen. But then you might get someone equally as evil that takes his place and could do even worse. And so I would have to have a pretty good probability assessment in my mind of what would likely happen, and then use that to justify my decision.
So 1 second, Jonathan, you can go. I'm just going to make one quick statement. I mean, I completely agree. It's so complex, and it's really interesting to look at it from so many different perspectives when you have that personal emotional attachment versus a detached logical or morality-based process of thinking and thought. And then you can take it to the next level. that if we allow assassinations, then that breaks the rules of war. And then what happens to the next country? And then what happens? I remind you that it was the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand that started World War I. So by doing that, now do we start World War III or IV? You know, it's very complex. And I think it's very interesting that we can look at it from different perspectives and realize that regardless of how we view it, there's definitely going to be a repercussion. Definitely.
My TLDR would be that if I had a pretty good idea that assassinating Putin would expedite the end of this war, which would be to the benefit of Ukraine, then I would absolutely say yes. I would, because actually there are so many people whose lives would be saved, and Ukraine would, you know, if it brought about the Russians pulling out of Ukraine, or would much more likely bring that about, I would be advocating for that.
Johnny, do you think it would have been a good play for Russia to have assassinated Zelensky if they could have done it, or would that have been a catastrophic backfire?
They've tried numerous times.
Tried.
I know they've tried.
Not
But would it have been a
theoretical,
catastrophic backfire where every Ukrainian man, woman, boy, child, women, child, girl, everyone?
No, it wouldn't have changed anything.
I think it would have changed. I think it would have changed quite a lot. So if I was Putin, so if I was a complete bastard, basically, and I'm an evil man, right? But I have my objectives in mind. It depends when it happened. If it happened right at the beginning of the war, that would have been good for Russia. If it happened now, or like within the last kind of maybe 2 years or something like that, I don't know. Interesting. It might have backfired. But then the thing about Zelensky is he is an iconic leader, and he's a tireless campaigner for Ukraine. Now, I don't know if there's someone that would actually fill his boots as effectively on the international stage as he does. You know, Trump notwithstanding. So I don't know. It depends when, and I'd have to.
He'd be a Lincoln or a Martin Luther King. Like he'd be far bigger than he ever was.
I think he already is big. I mean, we don't know what his legacy will be in the future. It all depends on how things go in the coming months and years. I think it depends on whether he goes for a term after the war is over, or whether he bows out in tremendous honor. But what wouldn't have changed is the Ukrainian people would have fought, whether he'd lived or whether he hadn't. They would have found another leader. There may have been a lot more problems, internal political problems, but people would have fought. So it wouldn't fundamentally, I think, have changed the strategic outcome where we are today. Putin, however, this is different. You know, he's in charge of a vertical system. It's his own personal weakness, his own lusts, his own let's say personal traumas that have shaped him, as well as his KGB training. So we see foreign policy as an extension, yes, of a sort of group or elite he's part of, but fundamentally they're an extension of him as a personality. And yes, there are thousands of Putins in the wings, but it may not be one of those that takes charge. And even if it was one of those, it's going to take quite a number of years for them to establish themselves in the kind of bloodletting and chaos that would follow from departure of Putin. So I would say probably my view is that this is not a moral question, and actually I think that's almost a red herring, because how, from a moral point of view, or let's say from a religious moral point of view, can you sanctify murder? Surely that goes against everything.
But
jury, judge, and executioner. Well, let me finish the thought. I think we need to judge it from a strategic point of view. It is, but it's
if he's commander in chief, if he's seen as commander in chief,
legal murder.
But it's no more murder than shooting a soldier. If he's commander in chief,
that's still murder in my point of view. But yes, I agree with you. I'm agreeing with you. It's sanctified legal murder.
Okay.
But I think we need strategic. Strategic is the angle. If by killing him, it ends the war faster, saves Ukrainian lives, and prevents subsequent wars, because believe me, Putin is going to start more wars after this one, more and more and more. So strategically, absolutely, take the guy out, no question.
I want to agree with Johnny Pierce that it is not murder. It is within the rules of war because of who he is. I just don't think it's an idiot. Ideally, I want to see a different outcome, and practically, I think it might backfire. But I'll have to defer to think about whether it actually would backfire, because he knows Russia far better than I do, and I'll stand corrected.
I'm just happy that we got the two Jonathans going at it a little bit, because earlier Pierce was trying to get me and you going at it, Gertis. So now we've got the Jonathans going at it. I'm enjoying this.
Can I just say this question was transcendental psych in the comments is my mate Rob. He lives around the corner, and he started the Tippling Philosophers, from which I get my name ATP, A Tippling Philosopher. My other channel is A Tippling Philosopher, ATP Geopolitics. He's just lobbed in that grenade, and here we are. That's what we do when we go down the pub. So Rob and I will go down the pub. We won't even ask each other how our families are. We just get a pint and sit down, and we go, right, okay, mate. So the meaning of life, right? And then we'll be like 3 hours of like talking bollocks, and then after 3 hours, it's like, oh, mate, how's the wife? And you're like, oh, are you all right? How's your life? That's what we do.
Sounds great.
I do think what we're validating, though, just by having this conversation, and it's been really refreshing, actually, and wonderful, because we look at it from so many different perspectives here, and we're still coming to show as an example, even though there's many things we all four maybe disagree on, how much we actually agree on when we can get down to brass tacks. And I'm just honored to be a part of this panel and have this discussion with you. But the reality is we're just in uncharted territory right now, because I am a proponent that this is not 1980. I mean, or not 1950, not 1940, not 1900. This is 2025, and we are dealing with some regimes here. And I keep using this phrase. We were having the conversation in the Signal group there, Jonathan, with Anna from Ukraine, that you have to understand one thing here. Putin is all in. This is his legacy. This is the rest of his life. This is his initiative. He will not be voted out. That's all a farce. Kim Jong-un is all in. He is a dictator of the most evil sort. The Iranian leadership, with the president today blasting Trump, the Ayatollah Khomeini, they are all in. And we can keep that list going on. Our American system and your European systems, you have elected officials for 4 years, 2 years, 6 years, 5 years, whatever it may be. But these guys are all in. And until the West, led by the United States and the great nations of Europe, can understand that these evil regimes are not just playing games, but they actually, with their leadership, are all in, it has to change how we view it and how we deal with it. So in that scenario, I hate murder, of course. I'm against murder, but the reality is he is the commander in chief, and this is a war.
I would like to correct Greg Terry. It's apparently the British who are the warmongers in chief, according to the Russians today.
Yeah, this is true.
That they started World Wars I and II. And here are two examples of warmongers here. And so
we're the peaceful Americans.
Well, I don't know. So how about this, Greg? Not Greg.
A pontificator. Oh, well, who's the pontificator? We've got a professor, a pastor, a pontificator, and I don't see what the other comment says, but yeah. Philosopher, you're the philosopher. I'm the pontificator.
Yeah,
right? Thank you very much. Yeah.
Oh no, you and a tippler.
Yeah. Yes. So Michael Vuchar says ATP Geopolitics put it to Gertis this way. Many Canadians are ready to take Trump out because he is a warmonger in the north. See what it says to that. So actually, the Canadians are arguably wanting to do that to Mr. Trump because of the way he's been treating Canada. Anyway, there you go. It could be that the Canadians are actually war starters, or they would blame Trump. So there you go. Right. I guess we'll probably
being attacked by a Canadian, and that's about being savaged by a sheep, I would imagine.
Whoa! Don't be harsh on sheep. Canadians.
Canadians are just nice guys, from what I've run into. So,
well, I wouldn't play them at ice hockey then.
Completely agree.
Jesper Peterson, thank you very much. That's very kind. Mitch Mazarol, one of my mates from my days of the Atypical Philosopher channel. Very happy to see this gathering. My four favorite horsemen, favorite four horsemen.
Thank you.
hit that like button, folks, and get the YouTube algorithm to push this live. Thanks, Mitch. Always a pleasure to have you hanging out. Steve A, thank you very much for your super sticker. One for you, Jonathan Fink. So one of yours. How would you have convinced someone in 1938 who was deeply brainwashed by Nazi ideology that it was the wrong path? Similar situations likely would have occurred with similar chances of success, wouldn't they?
This is a tough one, isn't it? Because of course it's slightly easier. It's slightly easier after the war ends because you have evidence of what's going on, and we recall these films where people were taken around the death camps. You know, people who lived in the vicinity were taken around and shown what was happening on their doorstep, and many of them subconsciously would know. But how do you convince it before the full scale of those crimes is actually taken place? That's a very difficult one. I would say, again, you have to think strategically in terms of stopping the Nazi atrocity. If you came back in time and you had that knowledge and you were able to sit down with Church and say that this is what's going to happen, mate, right? Do you spend your time, because let's face it, 1938, you haven't got that long. Do you spend your time trying to convince people of what's about to happen, or do you take strategic action to prevent it, not knowing what the alternative consequences will be in this parallel universe? And one of the things you would do is to say, okay, appeasement, clearly that doesn't work. So we stop the Germans at the point where they, retake, let's say, the Ruhr industrial area, or we literally nip it in the bud by stepping in militarily. History will then judge, let's say, that Britain is a massive warmonger. Oh, the Germans only wanted to reclaim their territory, whatever. But you step in and you prevent it. You don't know how history, the film is going to wind from that point on, because you still have Stalin. And let's not forget, World War II, okay, the British didn't start it, right? Let's just set the record straight. World War I and World War II, British, we didn't. That wasn't us, right? But Russia, yes, Russia played a role in the lead up to World War I, with the sort of alliances and partnerships and the kind of atmosphere was built at that time of that sort of imperial competition. World War II absolutely started by a combination of Germany and Russia in the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Russia did start World War II. Russia is busy trying to start World War III right now. So I think we have to bear in mind, when they say somebody else started World War II, that is an absolute case of projection, because it was them. And, those in charge of Russia know it. They have this phrase, not the one that we learned on the 11th November, Armistice Day, when we wear poppies and remember our war dead. We have a phrase, never again. Russia's phrase is można powtórzyć. We can repeat.
Interesting.
And get it right the next time,
For the record, I was just repeating what was the nonsense in the Russian propaganda this morning that I saw, that I highlighted in my video. That was just, I couldn't get through it without laughing when they were saying that the British actually started World War I and II. So I'm not saying that you are. I'm just repeating that nonsense.
Oh yeah, no, sure, yeah.
Can I? I'm going to have to shoot off pretty soon. I just want to. One of Jonathan Fink's commenters. Every time I see her comment, I'm sorry, this is no one's going to find this interesting at all apart from me. But Bell Ogilvy, who says this, I'm told quite often by Republican men that I should shut up and go to Ukraine if I love them so much. Every time Bell Ogilvy says something, I think about Connor Ogilvy, who plays in defence for Portsmouth, and Pompey and my local team. And so, Bell Ogilvy, you have a special place in my brain for your surname. So anyway, that's not relevant at all to anyone. Putin Puppet, thank you very much for the super chat. He says, I presume it's he, Jonathan, please provide this text, copy paste to spread it around. It's Michael Vuchard's comment that I had on my geopolitics video today. Michael Vuchard, if you haven't watched the geopolitics video, your comment features on that. I'll try and remember to put it on Discord or something. It was a really good comment about China, and it got a lot of, I think, good discussion going. People appreciated that. Anyway, guys, is there anything, I don't know if you guys want to be speaking for much longer, but is there anything that you think we haven't covered that you think is important?
I think we can just say our goodbyes. This has been an incredible time together. And I'm seeing in the chat, where people have just really enjoyed this type of conversation. And I saw the chat fly by a minute ago. Wouldn't it be great if this is the kind of chats that could take place in MAGA places or other places where people don't understand the picture and they work it through and they hash it through and they work together like humans? So yes, that's been great. I'll just remind you that what we have on the table right now is a truce possibility that is now being delivered to Moscow by the American, whoever the American delegation is that is doing that. I don't know, so I don't say, but supposedly, possibly tomorrow, we possibly have a conversation between Trump and Putin on Friday. Right now, the war is raging nonstop. I'm reading my stuff right now. Bullets are flying, drones are flying. There's been a big attack in Dnipro, a big attack in Odessa. Drones are flying all the way over to the Western Ternopil region. The war continues on. And now, as Rubio said, the ball is in Russia's court to see how they respond to this. And what do we do? For me, as I close out, I just say we keep fighting. We keep fighting for truth. We keep supporting these Ukrainian heroes. We stand and we do everything we can for victory, 100% victory. So we shall see. And remember, this is just the truce. This is not negotiations for peace. And people are asking me, Greg, earlier in my live stream, what about the territories? What about NATO? What about this? It's none of that. This is just to develop teams to get a 30-day truce to start talking about it. That's where we're at.
Okay. Lightning round. Just answer really, really quickly. Does Russia come to the table right away, or do they have to get strong-armed? How long will it take them? Go.
I'll jump in. I found it, and you probably talked about this earlier, I found it fascinating that the massive drone strike came on the eve of this concession.
Yeah, we talked about this.
Massive assault on Moscow. This is peace through strength. It's a signal. It's a signal to Moscow. We can keep going, right? We can keep going. And actually, the gloves are off. So think about it. Carrot and stick. I think this will be considered seriously in Moscow. They'll be figuring out, can we continue? Can we get more than what we've currently got? Or do we take this pause and use it to rearm and figure out who we go after next? Might not even be Ukraine, might be Central Asia, might be Moldova, might be somewhere else. And when they do strike back, do they punch through, let's say, the Azov coast and try and get to Moldova this time and forget about the rest? They will be seriously thinking, is this the kind of reset we need for our next wave of aggression?
Is it my turn?
Yep.
I think they initially accept this as a truce agreement, and with the intention, though, to get to the negotiating table, where then the discussions can happen that will begin to discuss territorial integrity, where they will then bring into their argument that this is Novorossiya, this is our people, this is our language, this is our culture, and we are liberating them from the Nazi regime, and they will utilize a week, 2-3 weeks to consolidate. I remind you that North Koreans are there, still coming. Russia is supplied by that military complex out of North Korea, by the Shaheeds out of Iran. Their economy is already leaning on that heavy war economy, and I think they come back at them again. That's me.
I'm going to say, well, first of all, I just want to do a couple of the final super thanks. Just to thank you, Ukraine, always in my heart. Thank you, Okie Dokie. Thanks to Ray Blaze as well earlier. Putin Puppet, what do you need to make this conversation international? This conversation is international, and more likes and shares.
We're no longer a colony.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. So my opinion is you are in my mind. My opinion is that I think, I don't know if I'm answering the question, I forget what the question is, but I think you are going to see Russia and Ukraine go hell for leather in the next week. I think they're going to be thinking, right, if we are going to do a truce, we need to expend all of our, we need to shoot everything. So you're going to see drones and missiles. Oreshniks are probably going to be dug out. You're going to get pushing on the front line pretty much everywhere. They want to flush the Ukrainians out of Kursk. I wouldn't even put it past the Ukrainians to do a little attack up into Belgorod or something like nuts like that. But yeah, so I don't know. I think you're going to get quite a lot of pushing there. And yes, Greg.
I just wanted to say this. They do have Oreshniks left. I see somebody in the chat, but I haven't even considered that. If something of that nature happens over the next few days, that's a game changer. Then
why?
Why? Because it'll be armed this time, and it will be devastating.
Oh, right. Yeah. In that sense.
It will be armed this time. It will not be unarmed. And that would, the world would be in shock. Listen, it's a devastating weapon.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's a devastating weapon. And of course it can fail. Something could happen, but you mentioned it. I haven't even thought about the Oreshnik, and I've been doing this all afternoon.
They had no warheads, did they? The last time it was.
It was just the weapon. It was just the weapon. Yeah.
And I'm going to leave everyone with this, which is a pretty surprising thing, because Keir Starmer in the UK is seen as a bit of a lukewarm kind of guy. He's not the most charismatic. I see him as quite a solid chap. I think he's morally a decent human. If you track his life and career, going through as a lawyer through to attorney general, it is about trying to do what is morally really the best thing he can, etc., etc. But he's not seen as like super charismatic or whatever, right? The Daily Mail has done a survey of American voters, and Keir Starmer is the Republicans' favorite world leader. Like, this is pretty incredible. So for all voters, it turns out that Justin Trudeau is, but when you adjust for just like Republicans, obviously Justin Trudeau is going to go. What's interesting, though, it's not just the fact that Keir Starmer is seen as by Republicans as the most favorable world leader, which is just quite incredible. But again, you've got, as you would expect, Kim Jong-un, Xi Jinping, and Putin down there. Putin -26.
Yep.
Interesting that Putin, although that's good, it's still like not Kim Jong-un. So there's still 25 points difference there, which is fairly significant. That's your kind of the extreme that we've been talking about earlier, that is going to be very hard to shift. But anyway, I just thought that was kind of good for the British voters to think, our Prime Minister has done a few good things in the last couple of weeks, and he's up there and he's being appreciated. So I'm going to take that.
Or is dumpster fire on there? I mean, it'd be interesting to compare.
That's
all
that
American
disconnect
voters,
that I was talking about before too, where Republicans really like there's a mixed bag in there. So at any rate, I've got to go myself. So I'm going to sign off here in just a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's me done. I suppose all the. Oh, sorry, Jonathan.
Could you mention Jigger's Paw before we go? Because we've just we've smashed through the target, and it would be, before we close it out and do the raffle, it would be great to. Well, we could potentially double it, So
yeah, so Jigger's Paw is an amazing charity. We visited them in Lviv. That is what Jonathan Fink is raising money for at the moment. We've just finished our Jigger's Paw campaign, ATP Geopolitics. So if you check his description, he'll have a link to his campaign. If you check my description, we're now moved on to a NAFO truck campaign that we're doing together with Rick the Ukrainian and Roman Trokovets. So please support either one of those, or preferably both. Jigger's Paw, amazing. NAFO do an amazing job as well. And we're absolutely proud to be standing with Ukraine and providing this kit for them. So please get behind that and help us out by help them out by clicking on the links in the description below. I guess it remains to be said, though, we will be keeping a close eye on this. All of us, all three channels that remain here. Prof. Gerdes has had to do a runner, nature calls or something. But in the meantime, guys, I guess Slava Ukraini.
Yeah, Herojam Slava, and I would just say it was an honor being with you three. You guys are gentlemen and scholars. Be blessed.
always a pleasure.
Dear friend of ours, Greg,
Thank
as
you.
well. It's an absolute delight, and Darren as well.
Yes, thank you. Guys.
Yeah. I mean, I had to say, out of you two guys, Greg's certainly a friend. But anyway, only joking, Fink. I love you, man. I love you.
I love you, mate.
Take care, y'all.
But only one of you are the dog's bollocks. I'll leave it at that.
True that.
Well, the dog has two. I mean, we right.
Y'all have a good night. Bye-bye, everybody.
Yeah.